inspired by real-life events. Narrator: Oliver Grant woke up at 5:03 a.m. inside a moving police van with his head pressed against the cold window and an officer saying, "You're being transferred for questioning in connection with the bank vault breach and 2 missing employees." And in that instant, his entire world stopped making sense. Because just hours earlier, he was a night security systems technician at a high-end financial facility in London, responsible for monitoring vault access logs, alarm systems, and biometric entry controls. And now he was being transported as a prime suspect in a multi-million-pound internal breach, case he had no memory of participating in. And the first shock wasn't fear, it was disbelief. Because Oliver was the kind of man who followed rules with precision, someone who double-checked every system before leaving his shift, someone who believed discipline was protection. But now discipline meant nothing, because every digital record pointed directly to him. And within hours, his apartment was searched, his work credentials revoked, his bank accounts frozen, and internal security logs flagged his access as unauthorized high-risk override activity. And Oliver sat in the interrogation room, replaying the last night in fragments, remembering routine checks, corridor walks, system alerts flashing green, and then a gap, an unexplained blank space between 2:11 a.m. and 3:40 a.m., and that missing hour had now become the center of an entire criminal case. And when detectives showed him CCTV footage of a figure in security uniform entering restricted vault control under his employee ID, Oliver immediately said, "That's not me." But the investigator calmly replied, "The system doesn't agree," and that sentence hit harder than any accusation, because it meant truth was no longer about memory. It was about recorded certainty. And by the time he was released under strict monitoring, the news had already labeled him internally as suspected insider breach operative. And outside the station, Oliver stood in rain, watching London move normally around him, while his entire identity had been rewritten in silence. And that night, he received an encrypted message on a burner device saying, "If you want to know what happened inside Vault Sector 7, come alone to Old Westminster Tunnels." And despite every instinct screaming danger, he went. Because when a person loses everything, fear becomes irrelevant. And in the tunnels he met Clara Hughes, a former internal cyber forensics analyst who had worked on financial institution breach investigations. And she didn't waste time easing him in. She immediately showed him reconstructed access logs and said, "Your biometric session was cloned using a live authentication relay attack inside the vault system." And Oliver said instantly, "Then I can prove I wasn't there." But Clara replied, "You're still thinking like someone trying to prove innocence, not someone inside a system designed to assign blame before evidence stabilizes." And she explained that the vault breach wasn't a simple theft. It was a controlled internal manipulation where access credentials were replicated through session injection, allowing someone else to operate under Oliver's identity while erasing alternative traces. And Oliver's access profile was chosen because it gave full corridor clearance without immediate suspicion flags. And suddenly, this wasn't just about missing money. It was about identity weaponization inside secure systems. And Clara offered him a choice: walk away and accept permanent framing inside the investigation, or help her trace the internal relay chain before it was permanently overwritten by institutional cleanup protocols. And Oliver stood in silence, listening to distant water dripping through tunnel walls, thinking about his mother living alone in a small town outside Birmingham, thinking about the years he spent building a stable technical career from nothing, and thinking about how quickly everything collapsed without warning or control. And finally he said, "If my life has already been rewritten, then I have nothing left to protect except the truth." And that decision pulled him into a hidden layer of financial security infrastructure where nothing remained static. Because every log they analyzed was actively being rewritten in real time, and every trace they followed kept shifting, as if the system itself was responding to their presence. And soon they discovered the breach wasn't external hacking, but internal privilege abuse involving a senior vault systems administrator who had been quietly rerouting authentication tokens and manipulating security audit trails to cover ongoing financial extraction operations. And the vault breach was staged as a diversion layer to conceal a deeper pattern of institutional theft happening over months. And Oliver's identity had been selected as the perfect frame because his access pattern was stable, predictable, and trusted by automated anomaly detection systems. And one night, while analyzing live vault authentication streams from a secured off-grid terminal, Oliver saw something that completely broke his understanding. His credentials were actively authorizing vault-level commands in real time, while he was physically sitting meters away from the system. And Clara immediately said, "They're simulating your identity continuously to maintain the narrative frame." And Oliver realized he wasn't just being accused after the fact. He was being continuously overwritten inside the system itself. And pressure escalated rapidly as anonymous warnings began appearing on their devices, telling him to abandon the investigation or face total legal and financial erasure. And sleep disappeared, trust collapsed, and even silence felt like surveillance. And at one breaking point, Oliver whispered, "I thought security systems existed to prevent crime, but maybe they only exist to decide who gets blamed." And Clara replied, "Systems don't protect truth, they protect control." And that moment changed everything inside him, because he stopped trying to defend his name and started focusing entirely on exposing the mechanism. And as they dug deeper, they uncovered encrypted replication nodes embedded within the vault infrastructure that were continuously generating synthetic audit trails to distribute blame across multiple employee identities. And Oliver's profile had been amplified as the central attribution point because it simplified internal containment strategy. And when they finally compiled enough verified encrypted evidence to trigger external regulatory escalation, internal containment protocols activated immediately, attempting to wipe investigative records across myriads of security servers. And Clara said, "This is where most people disappear from the system completely." And Oliver replied, "Then I'll be the one case they fail to erase." And together, they transmitted secured evidence chains to federal financial crime authorities, while preserving decentralized backups across independent nodes. And within days, the investigation flipped entirely. Emergency audits were launched, senior system administrators were arrested, and the vault breach was exposed as part of a larger financial manipulation network involving internal access abuse and long-term data exploitation. And when it was over, Oliver stood outside the reconstructed bank facility, watching security guards reset protocols as if nothing had ever happened, realizing that the most dangerous illusion isn't that systems can fail, but that they appear neutral until you become the one they choose to rewrite. And a week later, when he met Clara for the last time beneath the quiet tunnels, she asked, "What did this do to you?" And Oliver looked at the dim light, reflecting off wet stone, and said, "It took away the version of me that believed systems are always honest." And she asked, "And what did it give you?" And after a long pause, he replied, "The understanding that truth doesn't survive inside controlled systems. It survives only in the people who refuse to accept an identity they didn't choose." And as he walked out alone into the night above London, he finally understood the deepest reality of his journey. That sometimes life doesn't destroy you. It simply assigns you a false version of yourself and waits to see if you accept it. But the real survival begins the moment you refuse to live inside that version.